amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello listeners, it's terrific to be with you today, and I'm delighted to say my guest is General Sir Peter Cosgrove, who's one of Australia's most significant public figures. As a soldier, he saw action in Vietnam, winning the Military Cross, and rose to the very top of his profession, becoming Chief of the Defence Force. Soon after retirement from the Army, he was invited to be in charge of the huge relief and rebuilding operation here in Queensland, after the devastation of Cyclone Larry. In 2014, he became Australia's 26th Governor-General, travelling far and wide, representing us on the world stage and visiting our troops serving our country around the globe. Even so, amazingly, he made time to come and read the newspapers at 1RPH in Canberra whilst in office. On retiring in 2019, he was one of the most beloved and respected Governor-Generals in our history. To this day, and particularly this year, remembering 50 years since the end of the Vietnam War, and as patron of the ADF cadets, he continues to be a popular and respected public figure throughout Australia and internationally. Welcome, Sir Peter.
It's good to be with you, Rosemary.
As you say in your book, yours is the story of a boy from Paddington in Sydney, who achieved the highest office in the land, and that you wouldn't have swapped a moment of your life in getting there. Tell us how it all began for you, from school at St Francis, then Waverley College, and then Duntroon and beyond.
Well, the first thing is that I was wonderfully lucky with the fact that my family decided that, as all Australian families would want for their children, that they would step forward from the condition of that family in their own growing up lives. So Mum and Dad pushed the boat out for us to make sure my sister and I both got very good educations at good schools, and so we could feel just that area of opportunity opening up in front of us when we finished school. So for me, I said to Dad at some stage when I was getting near the end of high school that, right, I really have to decide what I'm going to do. And I had thoughts of things like being a lawyer, a journalist, a teacher, a policeman, and the Army. And the Army was a siren call there because my granddad, who lived with us, his own wife had passed, so he lived with our family. He'd been in World War I and World War II. Dad had been in World War II as a digger and was still in the Army. So there was that background. And Dad said, well, if you want to go to the Army, son, look, give being an officer a crack. So I saw the logic of that and applied to go to the Royal Military College and went through that process and ended up, hey presto, in January 1965 with over 100 other young Australian men standing around with their eyes bulging at the Royal Military College as the brand new class of at Duntroon.
And at Duntroon, you loved rugby and cricket, and Michael Battle, don't know whether you remember him, told me that you were a pretty good bowler.
Oh, well, I wasn't bad. That was my sport because I was pretty hopeless at rugby. I hadn't physically matured, so I was sort of lean and a bit skinny. So rugby I had to develop physically. But at cricket, I was pretty whippy, and I loved being a bowler. So I, if you like, in the first place at Duntroon, when you're looking to make a mark, people look at, well, what can you do on the sporting field? And I was a cricketer. Then I got a bit bigger, a lot fitter, and my rugby was also then something I enjoyed immensely at Duntroon.
Unfortunately, our Wallabies aren't doing so good at the moment, but the cricket's doing okay.
Isn't it wonderful to see fellows going out there when we were doom and gloom at the start of this World Cup One Day International campaign? We were getting beaten by teams that we would normally expect to beat, and suddenly we just burst out of the blocks after a couple of games, and now our chaps look like they're absolute world beaters. So we've got the big game, but as we have this interview, our next big game is actually an important game against South Africa. And they beat us, but the way our form is now, it's going to be a titanic struggle. I won't miss a ball bowled.
Oh, how wonderful. Now, comradeship is a wonderful thing, isn't it? And like in my husband's RMC class and my brother's class there, and as I said to you, my grandson is there now, The comradeship that you've carried over the years with your classmates is fantastic. In fact, I must say that once in Canberra, I was in a restaurant when you were still Governor-General, and you came in and were meeting up with all your classmates to have your, I think it was monthly get-together or whatever, and the comradeship between you all was terrific.
Well, you know, one of the things that the Army does very successfully, in my view, is to form these associations or tribes or communities of people, and they become your lifelong comrades in arms. And in that regard, Duntroon did that to our class. We were a large class. We were the biggest ever. 110 came in the door in 1965, and in the natural wastage of things, 66 were left when we graduated in 1968. So that whole 110 and the 66 that graduated, we're all lifelong comrades. Now, it's interesting. In amongst a group of that size, you've got your very best friends. You've got a lot with whom you are pretty friendly. And then there are a few, and this is inevitable, you can't stand each other. But the irony is, years later or during your career, you will retain those special likes and occasional dislikes, but your loyalty amongst the whole group is unbreakable. So that even if one of your fellows with whom you didn't get on was relying on you for something, and you would owe that person a debt, and you would meet that debt. It's literally not over-exaggerating to say you would die for them because they are your classmates. And I think that's one of the great things that I've loved about my military service, that you've taken this Australian bond that you'll stick up for your mates.
And many of you, of course, went to Vietnam together, didn't you? And fought side by side.
Oh, that's right. I mean, the classes in front of us, including your husband, were all people who, as a cohort, if I could put it that way, went over to Vietnam all roughly about the same time. Maybe there's a few months here and there about when people went, but the same applied to my group in 1969. The year after we'd finished, we started to trickle in to Vietnam, and it was wonderful. You're doing your job and you're with the new people that you've met through your employment in Vietnam, and then you'll look up and there's your classmate who's with another group, and there's a hail fellow well met occasion, and then back to the job in hand. So because of Anno Domini, the passage of time, we used to have these 10-year reunions. So we would be coming up, my group, to a 60-year reunion in 2028. However, because of the passage of time, we've decided to do it every 5 years. So we're having a 5-year reunion in December this year.
Well, I think, yes, it's very wise that, as you say, Robin, my brother Eugene's class, I think have them every few years now because it's getting on. Now, Sir Peter, I, like many other Australians, first became aware of your career during the East Timor crisis when you were named as commander of Interfet. That must have been it was an interesting time, I suppose you'd say, but more than that.
Well, at some stages, you have this serendipitous, wonderful luck. I happened to be in a dream job at that time. I'd been, unexpected to me, promoted to Major General and given command of the Army's 1st Division, headquartered here in Brisbane. And the upshot of that was I'd been there for almost 2 years, and along comes the need for Australia to lead a force into East Timor at the UN's request to underwrite and start the process of independence and the restoration of security. As we saw on television at the time, burnings, killings, all that sort of thing. The place was absolutely a mess. Indonesia was going to withdraw rapidly all of its security forces out of East Timor, and to act as, if you like, the new arbiter of security, an international force was going to go, and I was given the job of leading that. And it was just a wonderful opportunity. And it was then, as I was doing that job and even contemplating going, before I left, I thought back on all the ways in which experience in the military had given me the background skills to do it. Overseas postings, postings which had a diplomatic sort of cachet to them, commanding troops. I'd commanded at 11 different levels at that stage. So I was confident and not intimidated in the slightest. So I think one of my great opportunities was that I looked and felt confident about what I was doing. And here's the rub. The Aussies, the troops, never let you down. If you know what you're doing, they know what they're doing, and they'll have a go. And watching the Australians perform, and the other nations, I have to give them enormous credit too, but particularly watching our Australians perform made you just so proud, watching our men and women emote to the East Timorese and to show exquisite professionalism and restraint in the use of violence to the point where we re-established, I might say, a worldwide reputation for the way in which our force performed.
When you retired from being the Chief of Defence Force in 2005, your lovely wife, Lynn, who I had met, said to you when you were wondering what was next on the horizon, "When I married you, it was for better or worse, but not for lunch." Now, little did she or you know what was around the corner, because shortly after that, Cyclone Larry came on the...
I was like just about everybody else in Australia watching the vivid display of nature's violence up there in the far north as Cyclone Larry performed out in the Coral Sea and then was approaching westward towards the Australian coast. Where was it going to land? And then it came ashore, fortunately not on Cairns because Cairns has got a large population, unfortunately over the top of a little town called Babinda, and still unfortunately the cyclone hit places like Innisfail and all the rural properties and industries nearby. So that part of far north Queensland got flattened. I'm watching on TV and, you're sitting there seeing the images and I kept saying to Lynn, oh, gee, they're going to need somebody up there. They can't run the recovery operation out of Brisbane. It's too far away. And I said, they're going to need a Johnny on the spot. And that's all I thought. I was just happened to be at home. And then my phone rings and it was that wonderful previous Premier, Wayne Goss, who was then working for Deloitte. And I was working for Deloitte. So Wayne rings me up and says, Peter, I've been asked by the Prime Minister and Premier Beattie for your phone number, which I've given them. I thought, oh no. However, the phone rang and there's only one answer. Only one answer. I said, yes, of course.
Oh. But it wasn't your first cyclone, of course, because when you first came back shortly after you came back from Vietnam, Cyclone Tracy hit up in Darwin, didn't it? And as a young officer, you had a big responsibility up there.
Again, at that stage, because I was much younger and less experienced, I watched with great pride the Australian fleet steaming out of Sydney Harbour to go lickety-split up around the coast to Darwin. But of course, the Navy, wonderful folks, but they don't have within their ordinary organisation, other than strong backs and willing hearts, the wherewithal to do major things ashore of that nature, which is a lot of re-establishment of infrastructure, cleaning up of wreckage, all that stuff. But they got there and they did a magnificent job until the Army could start to flow in. I got a phone call again from a commanding officer to say, Cosgrove, you're going to lead the Army from the East Coast up to Darwin and you're going to be the reconnaissance officer and then we'll build upon whatever you tell us. So I went up there and we're followed by the battalion of which I was then part, and we started to do backbreaking labour. And my troops were magnificent. I had 100. We had about 500 or 600 troops. And the only way I could think of to take the humdrum backbreaking labour in the wet season in Darwin away from the equation was to somehow get the troops jumping out of their skin. And it's hard, when you're doing the repetitive stuff and it's about 110 degrees in the water bag and the humidity's huge. So I made a competition of it. I said, my company is going to be the company which in any given day will clean up more wrecked houses than anybody else. And the other companies got onto this, so we had this titanic struggle. And my guys, with their nose in front like a horse coming down the straight at Flemington, decided they would sprint to the line. Each day, we'd report back to the commanding officer, and he was alive to what we were up to. And provided we were doing a good job on each job, he didn't mind that there was this competition. And then smugly, each commander of each company would read out how many houses their mob had done that day. And I would always go last, and I would trump them with a big number.
Oh.
So, I mean, it was the making of my company. We believed we were kings of the castle. When we got home from Darwin after 7 weeks of backbreaking labour, those fellas were able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Oh, how wonderful. But I'm surprised that you are game enough to pick up the phone, because the next phone call, well, actually going much further ahead, of course, well after Cyclone Larry, was when Tony Abbott rang you up. Asked you to be the 26th Governor-General. Yeah, look, it wasn't entirely a shock in this sense. It was known that that wonderful Queenslander, Quentin Bryce, was coming to the end. In fact, she'd been asked to extend her time as Governor-General by a number of months to enable there to be the federal election. And then, as I understand it, Prime Minister Abbott and Prime Minister Gillard in the day, then opposition leader, made the deal that they would ask Dame Quentin to serve on, and then whoever won the election, so Quentin could either confirm who she had in mind to replace Dame Quentin, or Tony would make his own mind up on who he thought. So that deal was made, and when Prime Minister Rudd intervened, because he took over from Julia Gillard, he didn't change the deal. Right.
So now Abbott's in authority. Now, Centrebet or Sportsbet or one of those ran a book. So I looked myself up. Yeah. I was a bit short-priced. So I'd thought about it, but there'd been no formal... Right. I'm sitting in a limo up here in Brisbane, and we're going from A to B, and I've got a board member from the board I was on sitting alongside me, and I got the limo driver in front, and my phone rings, and up on the phone it comes Tony Abbott. And I thought, okay, the bloke's been Prime Minister for about 2 weeks or something. This is not to say, oh, how are you going sort of stuff. This will be a job-related call. So I thought, I'll be blasé when I answer the phone. So
g'day.
I said, g'day. Didn't utter a name. And the Prime Minister said, is that you, Peter? Yes. And then he says, would you... consider, I would like you to be our next Governor-General. And he said some nice words and that sort of thing. And I'm going, yes. And I said, oh, that's very interesting. Yes. I said, can I get back to you? I'll give you a call tomorrow. And of course, the Prime Minister must have thought, who is this flake? Who is this guy? So anyway, having finished the call, I sort of sidelong glanced at my mate. He was none the wiser. The limo driver, he didn't care. But I knew that if I'd have said, yes, Prime Minister, answering the phone, my colleague alongside me, he would have known what it was about, and then, all bets are off. So,
of course.
Anyway, I spoke to Lynn the first time I could get a private moment, and we both said, yeah, the answer's yes. I rang Tony back the next day, and I explained myself. I'm so sorry, Prime Minister, that I seemed like an idiot on the phone like yesterday. I said I had big flapping ears alongside me, and you can understand that I was somewhat trying to be a little bit coy. Anyway, so that's how it was broached. And of course, even though Lynn and I did speak, and I think that was proper to say there's actually been this request, the answer was always going to be yes. You cannot say no. If you feel you're qualified, your health's all right, and you're asked to be the nation's first citizen for a number of years, there's only one answer.
It's such an incredible honour. But of course, it wasn't your first time at Government House, because you were ADC to Governor-General Sir Paul Hasluck. And you say in your book, your classmates sort of thought rugby or cricket field was more up your alley rather than the pomp of Government House. So gosh, what did they think when you became the 26th Governor-General?
I think with great affection, my class would have thought of me then a sort of cheerful buffhead, vulgarian. And you're right, probably more interested in sport and a good time than any of the refinements. So I must say, sitting with Sir Paul when I went out for the ADC, potential ADC interview, and there were some other candidates, so I was one of several that were doing this over a period of days, when Sir Paul said to me at the end of our time together, and I'm about to head off back to where I was posted, he said, would you like the job? And what flashed across my mind was my classmates will never believe it. So I said, yes, Your Excellency. And hey presto, I got the job. And I loved it, although it was terribly hard socially. In those days, you had to be male, you had to live in. That's live in Yarralumla.
Yes,
you
yes.
lived in the government house.
It was really full on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I figured of the 52 weeks of the year we worked, I would have worked about 27 or 28 of them, and you worked every day of the week, and you dined in with the family every night.
Oh, right.
You wore black tie from Monday
Yes.
through Saturday, and then on Sunday you could go crazy, and instead of black tie to dinner, you could wear a lounge suit.
Good training for the future.
Well, we did relax a bit.
Oh,
I mean,
I'm sure we did.
boys and girls can now be ADCs. Being married or not, that's their business.
Of course, yes.
And they can live with that. Yeah.
It's a changing world. You're listening to Lots to Chat About. I'm Rosemary Peterswald, and my guest today is General Sir Peter Cosgrove, past Governor-General of Australia. This year is the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. My husband and brother served there, and like you, were voluntary soldiers. However, many were conscripted. The Invictus Games in 2018 meant so much to you because so many returned soldiers, whether it would be from Vietnam or whether it's from Afghanistan, not only suffer from physical wounds, but they suffer also from mental wounds that you can't see from the outside, but it's there, isn't it? So
it certainly
you've been
is.
a great help to them.
Yep. Look, after World War I mean, let's be clear that soldiers from time immemorial, of course, have been psychologically affected by being engaged in conflict and all the other stuff. I mean, being separated from home and kin for such a long time is also stressful in the extreme. So there's a spectrum of stressors on our people who wear the nation's uniform under pressure and frequently in great danger. So this has been happening forever. After World War I suppose it was something like, don't talk to your dad, he's having one of his turns. Yeah. So we leave him alone. He goes down to the woodshed and he sits there and all that sort of stuff. So it was rough and ready acknowledgement, and people basically just got on with suffering.
Yes.
These days, with, I suppose, science and the particularly medical and psychological mental treatments, we can both diagnose and help to treat people who have got an injury to the mind, if I could put it that way, a psychological pressure that is undesirable. So that's where Invictus is very useful, but there's a lot of different vectors of diagnosis and treatment now. There's quite a few organisations which both detect and assist with the amelioration of a condition. But Invictus often will show people who have had demonstrable injuries, limbs
Yes.
crippled or amputated, desperate wounds. And it's just uplifting in the extreme when folks who present in that way and the ones who have got the psychological injuries come together and reform a veterans community for something like mutual support and some level of competition, some level of embrace of camaraderie again.
Yeah.
And Invictus is wonderful to do that.
And now you're patron of the ADF Cadets, which takes you all around Australia. And so that must be back in uniform and incredibly rewarding.
Well, same old deal. I got a call from a minister to say, look, they're looking to, this is quite recently, a couple of years ago, in the life of the last few months of the previous government, I was asked by the Defence Minister, would I take on a patronage role for Navy, Army and Air Force cadets nationally in that the government and I'm pleased to say the present government, the Labor government, both have said they want to upgrade and improve and add to the numbers of cadets in Australia as a great opportunity for camaraderie and a little bit of self-esteem and sort of exciting activity for Australian youth. So they want to take the thousands of cadets we've got already and almost double the numbers in every state and territory of Australia. So I don't travel incessantly, but I'm a sort of like Uncle Arthur in the broom closet that they bring out to attend significant cadet functions, to review the cadets, talk to them, watch their training activities, basically to be perhaps at the far end. I get dressed up like the Duke of Plaza Toro in all of my finery. I've got, all the gongs in the world because I had a very long career. Right. And I wear that, and I suppose the cadets say, wow.
That could be me.
Yeah. And then when they're in their training activity, I just wear an ordinary army uniform, the camouflage uniform, and I just wander amongst them and talk to them. I like that, and it's not onerous, and it's actually, when you're at my end of the life, it's a bit uplifting. And, I hope there's not too much pontificating, but there's a lot of admiration on my part for these brilliant young people. You never know when you're talking to a Prime Minister in the ranks or the next Admiral in charge of the Royal Australian Navy somewhere. It's that sort of thing. And at my age, I love it.
And you did say also recently that a lot of our volunteers, of course, are getting older and ageing, and you'd really like to encourage the young people to become volunteers. So I would imagine that what you're doing with the ADF cadets is sort of a step towards that, isn't it?
Well, one of the great Australian characteristics is we are compulsive volunteers, and we show a sort of a muscular empathy with other people. So let there be a national need or even a local need, and you'll be killed in the rush by people coming to help.
Right.
I can recall after Cyclone Larry being up at Babinda, and Babinda, the eye of the cyclone pretty much went over Babinda. So I'm up there soon after I arrived, and I'm driving around with some my staff. I had a couple of people on a little staff. We got to Babinda, and we go up one of the streets of Babinda. It's not a very large town, and there's car after car after car parked alongside the dwellings, and every dwelling's been smashed. So there's a lot more people there than would live in that street normally. So I got out of the car. I wanted to find out what was happening. So I found one of these folks, and I said, you don't live here, do you? He said, oh, no, we're from Cairns. And he said he was from a church group. Yep. And what they'd done at this church group was all get together and said, what are we going to do this weekend? We're going to go to Babinda, and we're going to do clean-up work. So they jumped in the car. I said, so this street here where you're all working, are these your co-religionists, people from the same church? I said, oh, no, we have no idea about that. We just drove around Babinda and found a street which needed it, and now we're pitching in. And I thought, wow, that's what it means to be an Australian.
Absolutely fantastic, isn't it? And it is. It's everybody having everybody else's back, which is something that Australians are known for. Now, we could go on talking forever, but Paul is telling me that we're sadly running out of time, so we'll have to have you back again. But if you would like to read or listen to Sir Peter's great book, it is called You Shouldn't Have Joined by General Sir Peter Cosgrove and published by Allen and Unwin. It's available as a hard copy, an e-book, or audio, and as an extra bonus, which I thought was absolutely wonderful, is that Sir Peter reads his own book himself. General Sir Peter Cosgrove, thank you so much for sparing us the time in your busy schedule to chat. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you here, and I'm sure our listeners, as I've said before, would love to hear more from you. So if you are back in Brisbane sometime and could spare us a bit of time, it'd be terrific. And I think it's fair to say that it's your warmth, humanity, toughness, and loyalty that shone throughout your career. Thank you, Sir Peter Cosgrove, for your service to our great country, but also so much for being with us today.
Rosemary, thank you, and thank you to all the RPH listeners for listening in to this interview. I wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.